Hello YouTube, and this is Ian Bossa, and I wanted to talk about the new console launches, and I wanted to make a video to sort of inform you guys about the new console specs and my initial thoughts. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is they both have Blu-ray and DVD drives. It's pretty standard nowadays, but the one thing that's interesting is that Microsoft will be forced to license their Blu-ray drive from Sony, as they own the patent on that technology. They own the IP. So Sony, I guess that's a win for them, because now Microsoft is forced to use their technology in the Xbox. Nothing can really get around with that, since now it's just a de facto for anything that's 1080p HD. Both will have game recording PVR functionality, although I do believe it's limited to 15-minute recordings on the hard drive. But both can actually stream to, I think it was Twitch and Ustream, which is pretty cool. But by default, they won't save your stream, but there is apparently a way to change it. It could be bad, because if you don't have a computer and you want to let's say stream to Twitch and then re-download it, I guess that's helpful. Or if you just want to stream to Twitch and keep it archived, that's really helpful. But both consoles will have HDCP disabled when you're playing video games, but enabled when you're playing things like movies or watching Netflix or using Amazon or Hulu Plus. So that's good. I don't believe they support it out of the box. There's supposedly day one updates for both of the consoles, so you guys should look forward to that. It's definitely going to be interesting. One thing about the game recording on the hard drive is you need to keep in mind that the hard drives are actually 5400 RPM, so they'll most likely be compressed with H.264, so the quality may not be great but acceptable, similar to what you'd get if you download a YouTube video using like Keep It or Save It or whatever off the internet. And they're going to use H.264 to save on file sizes, mainly because both consoles only have 500 gigabyte hard drives. But each game that gets installed, at least on the PS4, takes up anywhere from 25 to 50 gigabytes. I mean, I'm looking at the Call of Duty Ghosts in front of me. It's taking up 49 gigs when you have to install it. I'm just looking at the case. So, yeah. But one thing to keep note of is that the GPU in the Xbox is less powerful, especially if they're going to be using it for recording purposes. Because I know if you do any sort of recording on your PC, you know that you use your GPU and you if you use like Fraps or DxTory or whatever, those frames are grabbed directly from the GPU as they get drawn. So I'm imagine you may see at least a few frames per second, like 10 to 5 frames per second decrease when you're using game recording on the hard drive, mainly because you're both writing to the hard drive at the same time and you have to capture those frames directly from the GPU on the console. Although there is a catch to that, and it's that I have a feeling the Xbox is only going to record in 720p, and that the PS4 will do it in 1080p. And the reason I believe of that is because if you remember to the keynote when they did it at E3, they had mention of a dual-core secondary background processor. And if you just watch the teardown video that the Sony director of, I think, technology did, he shows that secondary processor, and I imagine it's a dedicated H.264 encoder, along with like a dual-core, possibly ARM, because it didn't have a heatsink on it, so like a low-power chip to basically do your downloads in the background and just have it just for encoding, in which case you're not using the GPU to re-encode H.264, which the PS4 might actually have better quality recordings, although don't quote me on that. That's just a hypothesis that I think is going to be true, and it would be in their best interest if they actually did it that way. I'm not sure if the Xbox has something like this. There have been no real teardown videos that I've seen yet, so it'll be interesting to see which will give better quality recordings. So moving on is the RAM. They both have 8 gigabytes, although there is a distinction between the two. The Xbox currently has DDR3, which is a standard off-the-shelf. If you know anything about computers, it's just the standard memory that any computer, you know, even if you've upgraded the RAM in your laptop or on your desktop, it's just the same thing basically. But the PS4 is using GDDR5, which GDDR5 is based off DDR3, but it's meant for specifically for high clock, high speed memory bandwidth and transfers. And if you have a dedicated graphics card in your computer, like let's say I have a AMD Radeon HD 7950, and even on NVIDIA cards, it doesn't really matter. All these cards use GDDR5 for the sheer amount of memory bandwidth. Newer cards are getting to like 3 gigabyte, 4 gigabyte variants. So also both consoles have unified memory, although that's going to be both good and bad, because now it's good because both the CPU and GPU can now sort of talk to each other without having to perform extra clock cycles to read and write memory off different banks of memory. And so you can see higher throughput when CPU and GPU need to communicate with each other through the bus, rather than copying memory from different sets of banks into another set of banks just so one CPU knows what the GPU is doing, or vice versa. But one thing to keep note is I have a suspicion that the PS4 might have more than 8 gigs of RAM because of that secondary background processor. Usually in computers you can't have two different processors sharing the same bank of memory, although there are quite a few exceptions in server grade multi-CPU setups. If you know, there's a company called Tyan, and I believe Supermicro also, they do these high-end server grade motherboards that have multi-CPU implementations, where those generally you can get away with sharing memory because the chipset supports it, although I'm not sure if they've done that with the PS4. So I suspect that there might be an extra 1 or 2 gigs just for the background processor, especially if it's going to be used for doing downloads and like managing the operating system in the background when you're playing the game. So that might be an improvement for the PS4, although it could be its harm because you're now offloading a task to a second processor, and it takes more clock cycles because the main processor is going to hand it off to the secondary processor, so it might be slower when you see like your load screens as things get shuffled around in memory. But if they're using the same memory for both the primary APU and the secondary processor, then that would be great. Next, we'll take a quick tour to the GPU side. Both consoles are using what's called the APU, and they're 8 cores, and an APU is basically a CPU plus a GPU. It's this technology that's been developed by AMD. Intel has a similar implementation into their Core i3, i5, and i7 series, where they have the integrated graphics, although not to such a higher extent as the AMD ones, so you can get really good performance. One thing I would like to mention about the GPUs is that the PS4 has 1.84 teraflops a second, and the Xbox supposedly has 1.31 teraflops a second, although they try to remedy that by giving it a slightly higher clock speed by overclocking the chip, which it may run slightly hotter by like say 2 or 3 degrees, but like a 50 megahertz boost in clock speed isn't going to give you anything more than 5 frames per second realistically if you've ever done overclocking on your computer. Next thing to note is that the GPU on the PS4 has 1152 shaders, while the Xbox has 768. I believe the one on the PS4 is equivalent to a 7850 from the AMD lineup. I'm not sure what the one on the Xbox is. It's probably it has to be a lower end card. Another thing to note is that the PS4 does have a removable hard drive. It is 500 gigabytes, which it's pretty. I mean, it's enough space for like, I would argue 9 games. Same thing with the Xbox, but the Xbox is non-removable, and the Sony teardown video actually showed that you can replace the hard drive without voiding your warranty, which is also cool. And just like that basically summarizes it for the hardware side. And lastly, The PS4 has an internal power supply, while the one on the Xbox is external, just on the Xbox 360. I personally don't like the Xbox's implementation. I have enough wires on my desk as it is, I don't need any more. And then, quick thing, neither console has background compatibility out of the box, although Sony does partnered with Gaikai, I believe, and they'll do cloud streaming of older games. Mostly, it's probably going to be PS3 games. I imagine PlayStation 1 and 2 games will still be on the PlayStation Store. And that's it for now. Thanks and have a great day.